Hey guys, it's Eve or Lost Justice, depending if you know me on in-game or on the forums. Um, Basically, I created a tutorial earlier, and a lot of people read it, and there was actually a lot of people that was actually quite interested, and it kind of surprised me with such a small community of that play this game. So, part of it is that I said I wanted to do a tutorial on some more advanced things that I couldn't really write down in text. And so this is going to be one of the tutorials. I hope it helps you guys. And so we're going to go ahead and get right started. So what I set up here is two classes to show this example is a main class, which is what basically what we're running this program from, and then the separate code. So as you can see, I've already wrote some variables in here, and we have four different things of that we want to be able to get out of this. And so overall, to explain what Java Reflections allows us to do, is that in most cases, if these are public, um, or not final, we'll be able to basically take these and read them or basically allow us to edit them from other classes. But the problem is that a lot of the classes have these private variables in them, they have these private methods, and the problem with this is that we can't get these. And so a lot of times we end up just editing these code, and that causes problems when there's updates, and it's really annoying to deal with. Um, Also, it means that we have to actually edit the source code, which is something we really don't want to do. So what Java Reflections allows us to do is allows us to access these variables. And the thing with this is that we don't want to edit source code, because when you start editing source code, you end up having to cause more maintenance for yourself, and ideally when you create something, you want to have the least amount of maintenance on it. It's not always avoidable, but in most cases is what we're aiming for. So the first thing I've set up is these four methods, so one of each type, and I've set some like methods here that are public to show that I'm actually changing these things. And then in my main class, I create that class, and I go ahead and call each of those methods. So we're going ahead and call each of them. And so with this is that you can see that I'm printing out these variables, and these are things that I want to get out of it. Um, so we're going to go ahead and start with the first situation. First situation is that you have something like a private string or something, some private variable that you want to access. You just want to be able to read this, and basically you just want to get the information from this variable. So what we're going ahead and do is that I already went ahead and wrote this, is that we're going to look at how to call it. So in Java Reflections, when you want to access a variable, they consider it a field. And so basically I create this method that I use that's just a generic method to call a regular field. So we declare a field, which is going to be basically, so this is basically the field right here. And we have to get the class that the field's in. So the class is going to be some object class. So this here is an object, some object that we declared earlier up here. So we have this object. And then we're going to get its class because we are interested in what the actual class is, not what the actual instance of the object is. So we're going to go ahead and get the class, and then we're going to get the declared field. So this is where we actually get the field. So how we get this is by its name. So the easiest way to do this, if you really don't want to mess this up, is basically take the field, copy and paste it, and here you would put this, for instance. But in this case, I went ahead and put a string in the parameter. So now, after we have this entire line here, basically allows us to get that field. So now we have a private field. We can't really do anything with this yet because we haven't actually made it accessible yet. So with reflections, we can actually, so if it was protected, this would be kind of the same thing. So with reflections, what we do is we set it accessible. This is a very important step here that a lot of people tend to miss with this. This is where a lot of people get stuck on or don't understand. So what set accessible does is basically makes it kind of public, so we're able to actually see the variable. And so now afterwards, it sets the field public. And so after that, now we can actually get the variable. So if we go ahead and so basically now we get the variable, and we get it as an object. So if you want to if you know it's a string and you want to get a string out of it, then you have to cast the object to a string, which I'll show up here. So in this case, I went ahead and I'm going to go ahead and print out the get private field. So that's this method right here. So basically, I put in the object that I want to get it from. So I'm getting it from here, which goes, so this is this. And now I'm going to print out the test private test field because I'm interested in what it is. So we're going to go ahead and run it, and we should get this result. And if you look, hello, we got the private field and we didn't call it through a method. So basically, if this didn't exist, we would still be able to get the field through this way. Now, the thing is that we want to get a private final field. So in this case, it's very similar. There's nothing really changed. So it's basically the same exact thing. We put in the object that we want to get it from. So we get the put in the object that we want to get it from. We get the field name that we're actually interested in, say accessible, and then we get the object. And so we should get now this below that line. When we run it, look, we already get that line. So now we have accessed some private variables. Now, some things to note before we continue is that when you have two types of exceptions that can happen. So when basically, if you can see the comments already, basically this one never really happens. This is if you really try to access it in a really weird way or you're not accessing it properly. This one rarely happens, but this is usually when you're just flat out not doing something right. This one happens though. This one's a little bit more different. So if you have a typo in the field, so let's say you have the right class and you have some typo here. So like let's say for instance I put I don't know, I want to put 3 eyes at the end. What's going to happen is that we get the no such field access, the no such field exception. That's usually just when you have a typo in the field. Those are two exceptions that can happen, just be aware of them. So if you have those exceptions, you know what it is. And the other thing I wish to note is this here. So right now, there's two types of things that can happen. Is that this could be a static. That could be static, and if that was the case, if it was static, for instance, basically we would change this part to null. And the reason why we do that is because what the f.get does is that it gets an instance of an object, so it takes that object out of memory and reads it. And the thing is that if it's a static, we don't have to do that. We just read the class flat out. And so if it's, we just go straight to the actual memory where it is and we get it instead of getting the individual object, not the instance. And so if it's static, we just set this to null. That's all you have to do. That's only if it's static though. If it's not static and you want to get an instance of that object, so like, so let's say for instance we had private separate code SC2 for instance, right? Instead of putting, and we want to get the information out of SC2, not SC1. So what we do here is just change SC2, and this of course would be get, that would automatically mean that this would be SC2. If that makes any sense. I'm going to go ahead and put some of this, or I'm going to go ahead and put this class on onto the source code. I'm going to post it so you can try this out yourself. But basically, if you want to get an per instance, you need to put the instance there. Otherwise, just keep it null. So the next thing we want to do is basically we want to be able to set a private field. So now that we know how to read it, we want to actually write to this private field. So basically we want to change this and actually see it changed. So I want to change it to, I don't know, something. And what we're going to go ahead and do is I already wrote this method out as well. So I rewrote these methods for you guys to make this a little bit quicker. So again, we kind of follow the same thing we followed before. We get the declare field like we did before and we set accessible. So now the next thing that Java Reflections allows us to do is that we're allowed to set the variable. So again, we put the instance in, and all we have to do is just add in the extra parameter of what we want to set it to. So in this case, I'm just setting the field to, basically I've changed the field. So again, we're going to try to set it to this. And we're actually going to, call it out. So basically now what we're going to do is try set it to this. And we're going to basically call out call the field and see that if it's changed. So theoretically, what should be printed out is this line now instead of the previous line that was calling out earlier. And so all we do is just basically get the field set accessible, and then we add the extra parameter and change set to get. Get to set, and we put in the instance. And this should change what the variable is. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. You see I have changed the private field. So now we actually have managed to change our private field, and to actually show that it's actually changed, we're going to go ahead and call it print private test. That's what we set this as. So we're going to go ahead and call it should be changed. See, it's actually changed. So we actually managed to change it for that object without having a set method. And as you can see that I'm not cheating, there is no set methods here. So we actually managed to change a private variable from a different class. And that's one of the main things, the reason why this is so powerful. It's such a good thing to actually know how to use. So now you have the same question, is final the same thing? Yes, final is mostly the same in this case. So basically we're going to change the final field and we should have the same results. There we go. We have the exact same results. This is good. So now we managed to get private fields. We managed to set the private fields. Now the next thing you may be wondering is how to deal with private methods. Methods are a bit different. There's a few things that are different from them, but the process is mostly the same. So what we're going to go ahead and do here is I already wrote this out as well. So we're going to get the empty message. So the method that we are interested in is the empty message. So the empty message is right here. So basically, we want to call this method from a different class. So basically, empty message. So again, empty message in the object. And again, we cast it to a string because that's what we're expecting from it. Because just remember, it returns an object, not the actual data type. So now in Java Reflection they use method, which makes sense. So we're calling a method. We get the object the class that we're interested in, and we get the method name. So in this case, this is technically, if you want to see it, it's empty message. That's what would go here if we were actually typing it out. But again, I made this nice little class. So, and again, we have to set it accessible. So make sure you always do this. So now we call the method and put the type of the instance of what we're calling it from. So we invoke the instance of it, and then we store it in object R, and that's what we're returning. And when we call this, we should see the method called. Just looking for her. So there we go. We have the actual method called, a private method called from a different class. And the one thing you should note is that the errors are mostly the same here. This is just instead of field, it says method. But this one is kind of an interesting one. So let's say the method had parameters and you didn't specify the parameters. If you call a method like that, it will not work. So let's say, for instance, I don't know, let's just put that in there. So illegal argument exception, or for internal calls with a whole bunch of exceptions. So basically that's the exception you kind of get from it. So if you try to put in things that don't really exist in the method, that's pretty much that. And so now you're able to call a private method. So now the next thing to do is call a method with some parameters. So this method is pretty much the same. The only difference is it prints out the parameter. And so what we're going to go ahead and do is try to call this method. So it's basically the same thing, but it's a little bit different, and it's a little bit more complicated than the private fields. It's not as simple. So again, everything's pretty much the same, but the only difference is that we want this string parameter. Then we want to add in this string parameter, and we actually want to print out something to it. So what we want to do is that we want to basically send this string to a private method from a different class. So we want to send this string. So what we're going to do is that we're going to add this parameter in there, and the only difference is when we call for this method and try to find it, we specify the parameter type that it wants to take in. So for instance, if this took in two strings, we'd write string.class. And if this took in an integer, we just add the integer.class. We just keep adding the types of the parameter that we're looking for. And the reason for this is because Java allows basically method hiding. So you can have two methods of the same thing with different types of parameters. So you can call, for instance, let's say to specify this, we basically have if we have something like this. So these are basically these methods are named the exact same thing, but they have different types of parameters, and this is allowed. And so part of this is the reason why we have to specify this part is because we need to know exactly what type of method we're calling, and we want the one with only one string in it. We don't want to get this method. We we don't want to get it at all. So basically that's the reason why we do that. And then again we set accessible, so basically the same thing. And then after that, the next thing we do is that we actually add the parameter in when we call it. So basically we just add the parameter in when we call it, so make sure it's the same object type. And then we get the object returned. The only thing to note here is if it's again static, you just go ahead and set this point here null. So if it's like a static method, you don't need to get the instance of the method. So go ahead and just set that to null. And so basically if we call the method, we should have it print out at the bottom here. So we should have this print out. There we go. And so we call the method. So you said, hello world, I've called you. Hello world, I've called you. So there we go. So that's how you call a private method and you pass parameters to it. Now, this tutorial you might say, hey, this says no Hafen or Amber or any sort of coding in it. Well, it actually does. And the reason why I say that these four examples are very important is because I basically wrote an entire client where I'm able to run a full client and I don't edit a single line of source code. So when Loftar or decides to push an update, or Ramov decides to push an update, it takes me 2 seconds because all I'd have to do is copy and paste what their update is into my IntelliIG or Git pull, whatever, however way you want to look at it. And that doesn't touch any of my code and ensures that I have compatibility. And literally, like some of the updates, a lot of people who had their scripts and stuff broken, things like that, I didn't have any problem. And part of it is that this is just good practice because if you're editing such a volatile client, now you're able to edit it and you're able to maintain it a lot easier without actually touching source code. And as you can see, I didn't touch really any lines except for this, but I didn't touch anything here at all. I left it as is, and I managed to get every single thing I needed from it. The only thing you have to watch out for is that you sometimes have like sub-embedded classes. Those are a little bit different, but again, you can easily find out or ask on the forums. It's not hard to do those. It's basically the same thing. So thank you for watching. I'll go ahead and post this on the forums, and if you need me, go ahead and join the Discord because we have a lot of people in there that is interested in stuff that can help you, and that's where I'm more active at than the forums. Or if you need any help, go ahead and post on the forums as well. Thank you for watching.